Well, Rami Khouri is a distinguished fellow at the American University of Bei-rut. He joins us now from Boston, New York. Welcome to the programme. Firstly, as we've mentioned, the US Justice Department has announced criminal charges against Hamas's top leadership. What's your take on that?
It's no surprise. The United States has been heavily, enthusiastically, and vigorously supporting Israel in its current actions in Gaza and what the UN calls a plausible genocide. And it has long opposed groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, calling them, designating them as terrorist groups. That view is challenged by much of the world, and especially in light of the UN affirmation and the Geneva Protocols of 1949, saying that people who are subjugated under foreign occupation have the right to defend themselves by all means, including armed resistance. So these are questions. I'm not saying that Hamas is totally innocent. I'm saying that the allegations by themselves, like the Israeli allegations that are made, cannot be taken at face value. They need to be substantiated, and this is presumably what a court action will do. The second point is that the United States is very keen to hold Hamas responsible for its actions, but has no similar desire to hold Israel accountable for its actions. And therefore, in the eyes of most of the world, the United States is not an honest broker, but is complicit in the Israeli genocide. And of course, you see the support of the U.S. in funding and arms and diplomatic protection, and now this kind of judicial action against Hamas.
So what are the ramifications of this, if I can ask you, when it comes to the ceasefire talks overall then?
It's hard to tell. You know, the United States has long had a tradition, as most imperial powers do when they carry out international armed adventures, like in Vietnam. They negotiated with the Viet Cong in Paris while they were fighting with the Viet Cong in Vietnam. In Afghanistan, they negotiate with the Taliban while they're fighting with the Taliban. So this is how imperial military adventurism works. They cannot they cannot achieve their goals militarily, so they're forced in the end to negotiate with the party that they're trying to kill. And I think something similar is happening in the Middle East. They're negotiating indirectly with Hamas while trying to pulverize it through the Israeli actions on the ground and now through judicial actions, the judicial actions are pretty meaningless. They're not going to capture any of these people who are still alive and take them to an American court. But it indicates that you can negotiate with a party that you think is a terrorist group, and most of the world will not pay much attention to this because you don't really have much credibility. And it also detracts from the United States' credibility as a mediator. But the problem is there's no other mediator that the Israelis will trust. So you have to deal with the United States, but the United States is not an impartial party. And this is, the problem here is essentially the same one it's been for the last 100 years under the British and the Middle East and the US now, which is imperial colonial behavior. And this is what imperial colonial powers do. And we just have to keep pushing back against it and asking that the principles of international law be applied equitably to all parties who may be accused of war crimes or terrorism or whatever. This is something we've been calling for decades. Take any Arab party you don't like, Hezbollah, Hamas, PLO, anybody, take them to court, but also take the Israelis to court. The evidence for what the Israelis have done in Palestine, not just now, but in the last 70, 80 years, destroying villages and throwing people out and ethnic cleansing on a mass scale is massive. But the U.S. will not take this to court any more than the United Kingdom did.
Okay, let me just ask you this, if I may. What do you make of the huge protests that we've seen in Israel then? To what extent does that put pressure on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
It seems to put pressure on him, but it doesn't really put pressure on him in the same way that the massive public support in the U.S. for a ceasefire among the American people does not seem to put pressure on the American president either. These systems allow the person in power to do almost anything they want, as long as they have either a parliamentary majority, which Netanyahu does with his fascist colleagues, or they have been elected as the Biden administration has been. So we're not going to see street demonstrations making Netanyahu change. The only thing that'll make him change is serious external pressure, arms embargoes, maybe loosening up the Western resistance to the International Criminal Court, taking more actions, or the International Court of Justice decision being implemented, as more countries around the world stop inviting Israel to sporting events or cultural events, as happened in South Africa. That's the kind of thing that will cause the Israelis to change. But it's very hard to see that happening right now without any international pressure.
OK, we'll leave it there. Rami Khouri, we very much appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.